Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And from a reporting structure perspective, do you think
Good question.
should it report into functions, or should it report into a head of data, or should it report into like I've seen companies having the data person reporting into like marketing ops, or just like finance also. Like different companies have different philosophies. What do you see are pros and cons for like, some of the reporting structures?
Wait, you want to go first?
Okay, yeah. So depending on the stage, I've been through the vertical. I've worked through the horizontal too. I think in the beginning, in the early to mid stage, I'm a huge fan of horizontal org. I think the data should be its own function, overseeing the whole company, whether reporting to chief data officer or even the CEO or right CTO, doesn't matter. But it needs to be end to end. That has all roles, right? Data eng and the product analytics and marketing analytics, just so that team is overseeing the health of the company. As the company gets more maturity, when things are more standardized, it's okay to assign the team deeper into the business unit, and then have a dotted line, right, connecting across different teams. One specific example in Grammarly, I think is a good example. When I was hired, I was reporting to the CMO at the time, right, and it has a lot of issues. Because the time the product data people and the marketing data people are very different, there are silos. There are cases where in the product launch, right, product data folks will stop right here during the launch and pass everything to marketing. The product is launched, you figure out everything else, right? And it causes a huge disconnection. It doesn't facilitate the end-to-end thinking, which is critical for startup environment. So I actually, one thing I'm proud of doing is actually did a lot of effort combining the data team in Grammarly to be a horizontal team, so that everyone can, whether you are doing the data eng or product or marketing, you always think about end to end, right? Nobody stops until the project is done. And it's also helpful in startup where it tend to be missing a lot of structure and process. It's just easier for these people of the same job title to be in the same group, just so they standardize the way of doing things before they form the bad habits, right? That might be very different depending on the stakeholder they work with. I think in the case of Capital One, right, it's so big, right? It has to be deep into the BU. But in Grammarly, a lot of startups in the Silicon Valley, just horizontal would be a better option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Leslie, who works at Stripe and Figma, said a lot of companies require data science to be very multifunctional. So data science, like a data scientist, is like data analyst plus data engineers. I think that's also a very like I've seen that like at a couple of places. And according to Leslie, data analysts working on defining questions, like building dashboards and insights. Data scientists working on more ambiguous problems, like how to increase retention, how to increase activation, and some data people reporting into head of marketing, some data people report into head of engineer. I think that's really good perspective. When I look back to the Slack days, we have a horizontal data team, data analyst team, who they all report to head of analytics, and then you have marketing analyst dedicated to marketing team, product analysts dedicated to product team, and then sales analysts dedicated to sales team. So on a day-to-day basis, the marketing analysts working with me very closely on like my analytics needs, working on attribution, working on various like honestly, like both analyst work and data scientist work. And then they can also go back to their pod for and sharing experiences across the analyst team, so that they can also learn from each other and the best practices. So I think that's a really good, like it's a good structure for companies who are like at certain scale, which you want to have dedicated analyst and scientist resources, but also like they can share learnings.
I think it's also kind of depending on the stage. If you're at the very early stage where you only have 1 or 2 data people that you have as a resource for your company, a lot of this really depending on your company strategy. Sometimes I advise analysts and data science who's looking for a job. I always ask the question, where is the data sit in this company? And you can think about the strategy, whether the sitting makes sense for that business strategy. That's how you know if you can make an impact or not. Because if you put the data team under technology team, under your CTO, that means your data team for sure will be very technical driven. So that's where that's where a lot of time probably data engineering, data science team are gonna, if you see that's the early stage of how people put it together, then you know this data science team is going to drive a lot of the data infrastructures and then some of the backend infrastructure, even from a data science perspective. But if you see a data team that's being placed under product team, that means this company wants to, or at least that's to show the objective, or if you're the founder, you should think about where you want to place it. But that means you want your data driving your product growth, right? If it's under marketing, that means your marketing needs to be driven. But I'm just assuming there's only one data function right now, and where is you placing this function? If you're placing a data team and they're reporting to your CEO, that means this data function will be more of an operational role. So they work a lot with the business performance side and really setting up OKRs and KPIs for multiple teams. So that's how I would think about it. Some company also place their data team and their finance team as their first way. That's where they kind of that means this company again is very operational driven. They really care about their gross margins, reporting on their tags, all of that. But of course, later when you get to scale, then I think what you guys just mentioned about tech makes tons of sense. It's centralized and you have a hub and spoke format, because you do need data people to be in the domain experts, so they're close to the domain experts, so that they can come up with data solutions that can help the specific verticals, whether that's marketing or product or operation.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. It's like for different stages, you can have different reporting structure, and it really depends on like how we view data and the data's role, right? Like if data's role is more like helping the business to operate, there's one solution, probably like, reporting into BUs. And then if we think about data as like the core competitive edge, it's like, how do we actually use data that we have to either create new products or create new like added value for the company, or leveraging the data in like a bigger way, and potentially think about creating like a head of data role that's elevate that into more strategic importance.
Yeah.
Agree.
Cool.
Yeah, I was adding one of the maybe a little side story I think I read from one of the channels I saw. I think someone was posting the story about a company was hiring a new CMO, and the CMO was asking the analyst team reporting to the CMO to run a media mix, and the data was contradicting with the strategy the CMO wants to play big, and then the CMO decided to fire the whole analytics team.
Wow. Which company?
So, I don't know. I cannot disclose that even if I do. But this is a. I do think there is probably a need to come up with some guidance on how to structure the data team. One is because, as Leslie mentioned, right, even a company like Stripe, like Hyper, I know it's a very hyper data driven. It still is testing different things, and where things are, I think we didn't touch on is where the team sits is one thing, right? But it often causes a lot of conflict of interest, right? There are a lot of the people to deal with. It's not just the data. Data people has to really observe and tread it carefully. I think that was a very point. Yeah, that was a very extreme situation. But in our sense, right? So naturally, you would be sitting on the side who you report to, right? How to mitigate the situation where there may be some conflict of interest, right? What do you
100%. I remember.
I don't agree with your LTV, right?
100%. I remember, so when I was at the Athletics, I was reporting to the CEO. So me and Alex was actually chatting about this, and then he was like, we were talking about how do we want to place, because some of the data efforts is not under my team. I have a centralized team, and then we were talking about the situation, and then we want to centralize all the data analysts to be under my team, and then reporting to him, so that there's nobody's cheating on reporting. So we have an objective
There
view
you
on
go.
the
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. The storytelling can be different, right? Depending
Right.
on who is presenting. So